Hello and welcome to Talk 90s to Me, where we are sporting a bowl cut and a battered pair of Levi's. We've grabbed some booze from someone else's rider and we're about to totter down to Syndrome to shout at Carl from Cud. Yes, this week we're here for the early days of Blur, the pre-britpop leisure years before the Fred Perrys and the DMs and the number one single battles. I'm Miranda Sawyer and today I am delighted to talk to one of the four men who actually know the truth about those times. Hello to Dave Rowntree, drummer from Blur. Hi, Dave.
Hi.
So look, we're going to talk about Blur's early years, and you've actually made a book, conveniently, you've made a book about these very early years, which I have here. It's No One You Know. It is a selection of photos that you took at that time, and it is a very specific time in Blur's existence. How would you describe that time?
It's the time from really before we were signed, immediately before we were signed, I'd say, maybe a year before we were signed, up to 2 or 3 years after that. So the very, very first steps out into the world of being professional musicians, really, where we were doing everything for the first time. Everything was fresh and new and exciting. We hadn't got quite the jaded rock behemoths that we are now. We were just kind of launched out in a very small group of us and kind of thrust out into the world and told to get on with it.
Like little fluffy chickens.
And saying,
chicks.
I have made a book. The truth is that we have made a book, me, because you were my editor.
I was, yes. Yeah, I was your editor. And I basically told you to stop trying to put landscape photographs in and put in more fit pictures of Damon and Graham.
You did. That was your main job. And to get on with it.
Yes, there was that too. Yeah, So look, before we get into the photos and the book, I think we should kind of talk about how Blur got together, because you write about it in the intro, and I always think it's quite interesting. Alex, actually, weirdly, a really long time ago said to me that the hardest part of being in a band is finding the people to be in the band with.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about that, how you found the people to be in the band with?
Yeah, it was all kind of random, and I'm completely on board with that. The thing that most bands don't have is the chemistry, the kind of essential, indefinable chemistry that makes the whole thing work. And you know it when you see it. Mm. Yeah, Damon and Graham have been to school together. They had made music together since they were teenagers.
And this is in Colchester.
In Colchester.
Yeah. Graham
and I were both part of the music scene of kind of wannabe pop stars in Colchester. So it was a small scene. Everybody played in bands with everybody else. So
can you remember any of the names of those bands?
One of the bands was called I'm Dead.
Was it a goth band?
It wasn't. They did have a violin, so it had goth leanings.
That shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, no. It's luckily all of that has disappeared off into the mist and dark recesses of my memory. But anyway, Graham and I played in bands together. He had given up playing the guitar, which I suspect, and still suspect now, he found a little bit too easy and wanted more of a challenge. So he'd moved on to saxophone. And yeah, so I knew him. We'd played loads of gigs together, and he introduced me to Damon one day. He said that his friend of his was playing at the Art Centre, which is one of the few venues in Colchester. Did I want to come and see him? So fair enough. I went to see him. And it was an absolute revelation, because Damon had something that no other Colchester bands had, which was songs.
Suddenly you were like, oh my goodness, this is what's needed.
Yeah. Incredible to think, but that's far from unusual, it has to be said, in people not prioritising songwriting and prioritising playing their instrument better. It's pop music.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Give us a hook.
Just need 3 chords, turn out, make the words be about something. You've got to learn to write songs. So that Damon had spent his life learning the songwriting craft, and it absolutely showed. So I was gushing with enthusiasm, ran backstage after the show, gave him loads and loads of advice that he hadn't asked for, and then gave him my number. And luckily, within a couple of weeks later, he gave me a call. So that was the 3 of us. Graham was still on sax, and we started rehearsing in London. And
Damon was working at a studio, right?
He was working at a studio, which in those days was a big deal. Nowadays, the recording studios kind of isn't the thing it once was. In those days, you couldn't make records on your computer in your bedroom. You needed a big studio full of expensive equipment and men in white coats to operate it all. So, and Damon worked in one, and he was allowed to use the studio when there was nobody in it, which there quite often there wasn't. So we rehearsed in there. We got a string of bass players and guitarists drifted through, and we played a string of gigs with them under a whole load of terrible names. And then we'd arranged with the studio owner, he was going to give us a weekend recording free of charge. So just before that was going to happen, the latest incarnation of the bass player and guitarist left to form their own band.
I heard that you shouted at them and they left.
It was certainly my job. Sacking people evolved as one of my roles in the band over the years. So I'd sacked almost everyone that's been sacked from working with Blur. I've done the sacking of, but I don't think I did shout at them. They wanted to do their songs. Damon and I and Graham wanted to do Damon's songs, and so they left to form their own band to do their songs.
Yeah, to them.
Well, I still see one of them. I still see a guy called Dave Rowntree. He works in publishing now. He's a really nice guy, and actually, I think.
But he left, so we don't care.
Actually, I don't think he. If that was me, I would spend the rest of my life regretting it. But I don't think he did. I think he thinks he made the right choice.
So there were three of you.
There were three of us. Then the studio owner sat us down and said, "Oi, Coxon, put that bloody saxophone down and pick the guitar up again. What are you even doing?" You know, this was the late 80s, early 90s. Bands didn't have saxophones in them. Get on the guitar. And so then we just had to find a bass player. And as luck would have it, the guy that lived next door to Graham in the halls of residence at Goldsmith College was a guy called Stephen James, he was known then. And Graham said, well, I can get him down. I don't know if he's any good.
He looks good.
Yeah, it looks good. He says he got a bass. He does own a bass. That's great because we didn't have a bass. So he came down. And that was that, really. That chemistry thing happened, indefinable. I don't know what causes it, but immediately we were much, much better.
But also, didn't you, as soon as you got together, you wrote There's No Other Way, right?
Yeah, on the first day.
So then
No, She's So High.
She's So High, okay.
Yeah,
so then that's kind of amazing,
Yep, that all of that magic started to happen. All the songs started to sound really good. Alex's bass playing was very unusual. I'd never heard anybody play bass like him at the time. He didn't, and it turns out most of the bass gods do this. He instead of just playing the root notes to the chords and filling out the bottom end, he played tunes.
Well, he also used to think kind of deliberately. I mean, not maybe not deliberately, but what he did was almost like play a disco kind of like Duran Duran style thing in an argument against Graham's jagged noises.
Yep. So Graham was playing anti-guitar, Alex was playing anti-bass.
Yeah.
So the two kind of fitted in really, really well together. And that was that. As I say, we were signed within 6 months.
Yeah.
And that turned out, while we thought that was the end of something and we'd arrived, actually, that was the start of something. And it was quite a long time before we arrived.
But that was, this is kind of part of what the book covers. So you're a band, you're writing songs, and this is all fabulous. And you think, yes, exactly. We've signed. This is amazing. Perhaps your initial kind of contract was not the best. How much did you sign for?
£7,000. You thought I was going to say £7 million, didn't you? £7,000 for 9 albums, I think it was.
What? What were you doing?
Which was one of the worst record deals anyone has ever done. The ability to get out of your contract because it's rubbish was pretty much ruined by George Michael when he took on Sony in a sort of landmark music industry case, and Sony wiped the floor with him. And at the end of that, we were sitting down with our lawyer, and he said that unfortunately, that has pretty much made it impossible now for any musician ever to get out of their contract ever again, no matter how badly it was. And then he put this kind of lawyerly pause. except you. So
Well,
our contract was so bad, he thought
that you could do something about it.
No judge in the universe
would hold it up.
Yeah, would uphold it, absolutely. So,
that's lucky. It was that bad. You could get out of it.
Yeah, it's when we got some success, we renegotiated it, and we've been renegotiating it ever since.
Nice, I like it. Okay, so look, at the beginning of the book, we get you in the studio, and you're in the studio, you're basically working with Stephen Street, and you're about to make Leisure. Do you want, studio talk can be quite boring, let's face it. But I suppose what I wanted to do was just, from you, describe what it felt like to work in a studio with somebody like Stephen, who's really good, and you to it be enjoyable, I suppose.
Yeah. We went through a process really before finding Stephen, and we worked with a bunch of producers,
all called Steve,
almost all of which were called Steve or Stephen. Yeah, so clearly that was the universe holding up a big sign for us. And I think maybe it was Andy Ross from Food Records, our label, who suggested Stephen Street, and he was the extra X factor that we needed, because it was he approached it in quite a different way. He could sort of wind the tape forward and see what it ought to sound like, and could see why it wasn't sounding like that at the moment, and knew what to do to fix it.
Yeah.
Which is that's quite a skill. And many of the other producers, while being absolutely brilliant at what they were doing, were just trying to get the best version of where we were at the moment, rather than seeing how we could progress. How the songs could develop and how our playing could develop to turn it into.
That's quite nice. It's like an aim, isn't it?
Yes. So that's a rare find, really.
Yeah.
And it's not to say the other producers we work with couldn't do that with other bands, but Stephen was able to do that with us, and none of the other producers had approached it in that way.
He did wear a poncho, though.
Yes, he. Now I can't take the piss out of anybody else's fashion sense. Look at me. But he did. The rave culture in the early 90s took on a variety of forms.
It did.
And yes, Steve embodied one of those alternative forms. I think Damon beat that out of him, though, over the course of the first album. I think by the end of the first album, he was dressed in kind of tight jeans, mod gear.
Although, to be honest, I have to say, when I first met Damon, he was still slightly on the edge of that look anyway. He had a bowl cut.
Yep.
And there's evidence of this, photographic evidence in this book. He looked amazing, obviously, but that kind of slightly longer cut was quite prevalent.
Yep. The whole thing, all of that sort of grew out of the Manchester scene, which had, by the time we were starting, was in decline, but still the fashion was everywhere. And
you can you can slightly hear it on Leisure as well, actually. Yeah. That kind of, it's a bit more shuffly, and the lyrics are vague in the way of that.
Yeah. Both things we kind of kicked against, really, on the second album.
Yeah.
But we were learning how to make records, really. We weren't that sure what we were doing. The more shuffly ones were done with producers other than Stephen Street in general. And that reflected what some indie bands were having limited success with at the time. Our label were keen for us to slot in with trends rather than try and be out there blazing a trail. And a lot of people were giving us advice, and I think quite sensibly we listened to it. It did end up making quite a schizophrenic album, shall we say, but that's far from the only schizophrenic Blur album.
Yeah, we might come on to that.
So, half of the course, really.
And so you're working in the studios, and then you're going out a lot. Because that's how I know you, is because I was going out a lot. This is what forms a scene. There's a lot of people the same age who worked in the music industry who were all going out a lot. So I was working for Smash Hits and then Select magazine. There was obviously NME and Melody Maker, and there were lots of other bands in a similar position to you, which is basically, good bands trying to get better and trying to be recognised and trying to have hits. And that made a kind of what we now call, I suppose, a scene, really. Did you feel like there was a scene? Did you feel part of it? Yeah,
there was definitely a scene. So there were maybe 30, full-time journalists, 40 maybe, amongst all of the papers and magazines and everything. Maybe the same number of people in bottom of the ladder, first rung bands who were able to give up the day jobs. And maybe the same number of people again in the kind of entry-level positions in A&R and at the labels and publishing. And so there was a gang of us. We all kind of knew each other. And yeah, we all pretty much hang out together. The epicenter of it all was a woman called Polly Birkbeck, who at the time we were signed worked at our label Food Records, which she went on to work for one of the big press agencies.
She went to work for Savage and Best.
Yes.
She did the PR for Elastica.
Yes. And she knew absolutely everybody and was the kind of social secretary of it all, really. So everybody would ring Polly in the afternoon. What's going on this evening? Oh, Ryder playing at the Town and Country. She'd get everybody on the guest list, and we'd all meet up. We'd all be at the bar at the back, slagging everybody off and everything off.
And thus a scene was formed. There is literally a photograph, like in this book, where Graham is on the phone in the studio, and you looked at that photo and going, he's definitely phoning Polly.
Yeah, it's the studio Maison Rouge where we recorded much of our early material. There was a phone in the control room of the studio. Mike Smith, our publisher, is there, standing next to Graham, and Graham's on the phone. Well, if Mike's there, it's a Friday, without question. And if it's a Friday, Graham is either calling his girlfriend to say, I'm going to be late home tonight, or he's on the phone to Polly saying, where are we going tonight? Can we get on the guest list?
There's some really charming photos as well in a club called Syndrome, which I kind of referred to in the intro, which is a tiny club that only lasted for a few months, but there was on Oxford Street in London, where a lot of these bands hung out, basically.
Yeah.
And can you remember much about it? I can't remember loads about it, but...
Yeah, it kind of lasted longer than a year, can it really? It's like prime Oxford Street real estate, right by the station.
Yeah.
And basically it became the Thursday night destination. So you might go and see a band first, you might not. But everybody who was in town headed down to Syndrome. And the attraction for the bands was, number one, they were selling drinks. You got it free if you're in a band. That was an excellent attraction because we were all utterly broke. Number two, they sold drinks for £1. So you could go in a fiver and get absolutely plastered. And number three, there was a DJ in there and a dance floor.
Yeah.
So if your new single was out, the DJ, if you were lucky, would play it, and you would have to nonchalantly, looking like you didn't care, sidle over to the dance floor to see if anyone was dancing.
Just cock it up, yeah. See if that was okay. There's also an aspect to being, I mean, obviously at that time, all the bands, including yourself, like nobody had any money.
No.
And one of the things that when we were doing the book that you told me about, which I thought was interesting, is Blur were always incredibly charming, and you were all really outgoing. Like you were good at talking to people, you liked other people. And one of the things that you did, which I think is kind of sweet and also slightly manipulative, but amazing, is you would go and see people that you were working with, right?
Yeah.
And why and how did you do that? What happened?
Damon thought, if we ever got a day off, we definitely shouldn't stay at home and kind of stare at the four walls of our bed sits. We should just carry on meeting up midday in the West End and go and see somebody. And so we did that.
And by somebody, who do you mean?
Somebody from the label, somebody from our publishing company, people from the hire companies we hired gear from people from the coach companies we got coaches from, just people we worked with. Because his theory was, you go somewhere, you go to see somebody at EMI, for example, which was the kind of parent label at the time, make friends with them. They'll buy you lunch, probably. We were broke. Did I mention that? But then you're at the top of their to-do list. Their pile, their in tray, you're going to be at the top of it. And so whenever we weren't doing anything else, we would do that. Just go and see people of the kind of coterie that looked after us and that we did business with, really. And that was a really, really powerful thing to do. And that's what I always advise young bands to do. go and make friends with all the people you work with.
Yeah, because that helps. You ended up in a kind of like debt, didn't you? You ended up like owing 60 grand or for some reason, right? You had like it didn't really work out at the beginning, all the money went wrong.
Yeah, we had all the classic mistakes, ripped off by our first manager and all the dreary things. Took me by surprise, really. I just assumed that was all from the 1970s and couldn't possibly happen in the 1990s. I mean, that's the modern age. I thought that everybody must know now who the Sharks are.
Sharks are everywhere, especially in the music industry.
I was so naive. And so, we'd made all the classic mistakes, ended up not only completely broke, I mean, all the money from the first album had gone, but the manager hadn't paid any bills either. So, in fact, we were in debt to the amount where we should have been in credit. We should have made enough money off that album to tide us through and allow us to record the second album. But in the end, none of that was true. So at the time, I thought that was nearly the end of the band. I mean, luckily we had made friends with all of our people we worked with, because then we again went round to see them and explained the situation, and we could do it from a friendly way. And we said to everybody, we'll definitely pay you back. Don't worry about that. Wild optimism. But I said, look, you can either have half the money now, or we'll set up a payment plan and pay you back over the next year or so. Almost everybody said, don't worry, I'll just take half the money now and we'll just carry on as if nothing has happened.
So it was a good thing to do, to make friends with people.
So that showed that idea had been the right one, to make friends with everybody. Also, to pay everyone back now, we took a big advance on a merchandise agreement, one of the terms of which was we had to go and spend 6 months touring in the States. And, we were tiny indie band, could barely get arrested in the UK, let alone in the States. And so by the 6 months tour was quite stressful, shall we say. That was nearly the end of the band as well. However, by the end of that, we came back having a much better perspective on the UK and what we liked and what we didn't like about it. And that was the beginning, really, of the next phase of the band's career. They started concentrating on England and Englishness and what did that mean? What was good about it? What wasn't?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you went, I mean, there are pictures from that tour in this book. They're really great, and we'll talk about them. But what's interesting about that is basically you go away to earn this money back, and the distances in America are really knackering. It's also really hard to be a small band in that environment, a small British band outside of maybe New York and LA, because nobody really cares. But also Nirvana had happened. So Nirvana happened. So that meant that everybody was looking for, essentially Nirvana is rock music, isn't it? It's like really tuneful, amazing rock music.
Yeah.
And I would argue that really what Blurred does is pop music. I mean, it does you do very interesting versions of it, but that's what British people do. We do pop music and Americans do rock music. But everybody was looking that way. So it's even more disheartening for a small British band to go around America in that situation. It's really difficult.
Yep. And the truth about America is there's no alternative to doing that. If you want to be successful in America, you have to start at the bottom and claw your way up, which means grinding around the States for years on end, playing these tiny clubs, hoping that you're graduating to the slightly bigger clubs each time. And that's a full-time job that takes years to do if you're interested in doing it. I think by the end of our 6 months, we'd come to the realization actually we weren't interested enough in kind of American mega success to make the sacrifices involved, especially as during that 6 months we were pretty much forgotten at home. We got back to the UK and the UK had moved on and we were not part of it. And so we had to start again from the beginning back in the UK.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I mean, I do think it's partly made Blur though, because that happened and it was really difficult. And then the songs changed because of that as a reaction against it.
Yeah.
But also when you got back, like Suede were massive, which is obviously like a huge kind of,
Yes. That gave us something to kick against though. So that turned out to be, you see, all of this stuff at the time just felt, oh my God, felt like disaster after disaster. But all of these disasters were the making of the band, really.
Yeah.
But all of them gave us the impetus to do what we needed to do in order to propel us to the next stage.
And would you say, because like Damon is notoriously competitive, that's like one of his driving features. Would you say that the rest of you are also, I mean, it's hard to be as competitive as Damon, but as competitive as well?
I'd say as ambitious, perhaps not as competitive. Damon's ambition manifests itself in various ways, but one of them is in absolute extreme competitiveness to the point where if anybody else is successful at all in any genre, he takes that quite personally.
It's like a knife to the guts.
As if there isn't quite enough success to go around, and you've had a bit of my success. Hang on.
But you're ambitious, so how do you mean by that?
Well, we all wanted and still want to move things on, to be bigger, more successful, better songs, sell more. We've always all wanted that. That's a big unifying force between us. No amount of success is ever enough. We've always got this presumably quite unhealthy drive.
But it's interesting, I mean, because that means like, how do you define success? Because I remember at a certain point when you were, obviously you grew and grew and grew. That's what happened. But there was a point where you took a detour away from success, and we could say that was after The Great Escape, when Graham in particularly couldn't deal with that level of success, and you had to kind of do a left turn.
Yeah, that's all a bit more complicated than one can unpick. Yeah, in a few. There's a podcast in that on its own, I think. And
we'll do that later.
Graham would probably have to be in the hot seat for that one. I'm not sure it was success really. But the kind of the sacrifices you have to make, sort of not having a home life, not having a private life, not having space, not having the ability to do anything else, that comes at a price. So at some point there was going to be a reckoning. And several times in Blur's career, there's been the reckoning of that. And, to the point where now we just don't engage with that anymore. We make sure that our friendship and our lives and our kind of well-being comes first. And if we play some gigs occasionally and make a record from now and then, all the better. And that seems to be suiting us much better. But, without that, if you're not willing to make those sacrifices, you definitely won't be successful, because there are a million other bands out there who are. So it takes that kind of insane drive. And, you say, what's success? Success is always the thing just out of reach in front of you. I don't suppose any of us look at our career and go, there we are, see, we've done that. We've achieved what we set out to achieve. Nowhere near have we achieved what we set out to achieve.
Okay, he's still going. He's still going. Okay, let's go back to that. So the American tour, which is in here.
Yeah.
There are some really lovely photos, and there's including one that gives you the title of the book, which is, it's quite a cool coat. I mean, do we call it a coach? We call it a bus.
Call it a bus.
Tour bus. Yeah. But it's quite cool, but maybe not like kind of with all mod cons, but it's quite a cool looking bus. And it has a particular label at the front of it. And do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. This is our first tour bus, picked us up, I think, in Canada, but I may be mixing up a whole bunch of tours in my head. And it was kind of sort of vintage looking Americana kind of bus. I think it had been a Greyhound bus back in the day. It had been converted to being a tour bus. And getting on your first tour bus was like quite an experience, really. Even though I look back on it now.
There's that separate bit at the back, isn't it, where people can sit around?
Yeah, there's a back lounge, there's a front lounge usually, especially in America where there's no kind of health and safety. All of that's outlawed in the UK and Europe because, if the bus crashes, all these things fly off and kill everyone inside. In America, they don't care. It's kind of kill everyone, but look cool while you're doing it.
Yeah.
So, they have little chandeliers in the ceiling and all this kind of stuff, all of which is basically shrapnel. But, so back lounge, front lounge and bunk beds inside in between the two. And we walked on there and thought, this is it. We have arrived. Ladies and gentlemen, Blur have entered the building. And the antidote to all of that was the driver, Kenny, who had the most wicked sense of humour, biting sense of humour, really, of anyone I've ever met before or since. And he was determined that this bus wasn't going to go to our heads. So he immediately christened us pinheads. You pinheads this, you pinheads that. And he just took the piss out of absolutely everything about us, from our kind of baggy jean clothes to the music
he was
to our
more
accents.
rock, wasn't he?
He was just, if anything we were for, he was against. And so on the day one, he'd customised this bus, the old window at the top of the front of the bus where the destination would be. And remember, it's like a 50s bus probably, or 60s bus. So they would have had a sort of a roller with the destinations printed on, and you would select the destination with the roller. So he changed the roller to describe whatever band was on the bus. Because whenever you pull into a bus stop, if you're a tour bus, everyone gathers around, who's on the bus? Who's on the bus? So he had various things on the roller. Rock stars, a world tour he could select. We took one look at us, pinheads, scrolled all the way down to the bottom, no one you know. And that was that for the tour. Yeah. Yet another humiliation from Kenny. But the reality is, and why I picked it for the title of the book, he was absolutely right. We were a tiny little band. We were a tiny band in the UK. We were playing to 50 people at the Camden Falcon that held 53 people. We were a tiny little band. So in the States, we hadn't had a hit of any description. Really, the only people who did know who we were the Anglophile kids that read the British music press kind of 2 weeks later when it got air freighted over. You could get on the cover of Enemy or Melody Maker without even having had released a record. Yeah. So, which we did. In fact, we were on the cover of Sounds before we'd even released a record.
Yeah, and it happened with a few bands, didn't it? Same with Suede. It happened with lots of bands.
Yeah. So nobody knew that outside the UK. They thought if you're on the cover of the music press, you must be this massive band playing arenas. So the reception outside the UK was often a bit more frantic and wild than it was inside the UK. But.
Yeah. What's sweet about this book is this: you're doing these tours. All these pictures are like the first time you've done anything. So it's the first time you go to America and do this tour. It's also the first time you go to Japan, and there's some really nice photos of that, because in Japan you literally are greeted by screaming crowds, aren't you?
Yeah.
Which must have been amazing. Like, you could retire then, couldn't you? Just like, this is the high point. We've arrived. There's screaming crowds at the airport. Everybody wants to try and get onto our bus. They're offering us presents. This is it.
Yeah, it's actually quite unnerving. The first time it happens, it's actually quite unnerving. So where's this going? What's going to happen?
We're going to die.
we didn't have security. We weren't kind of. What happens next?
Yeah.
And there's, the picture in the book of one of the early interviews we did at a radio station. The radio station, the back wall was glass in a way that's now reasonably common, but back then it was a new thing. The glass opened up into a shopping mall. And we had decided the Japanese interviews could go on a bit. And we decided, instead of engaging with all that, we would just buy some acoustic instruments and turn up and do a little gig. So Blur's going to do a gig at this radio station, started trending on whatever was happening pre-social media in those days. And
I think people just phone people up.
Yeah. And the radio station got utterly mobbed with screaming girls, and it to the point where you couldn't hear what we were playing. The interview was
abandoned.
Yeah, and we had to be smuggled out of the back of the shopping centre through a record shop with kind of coats over us.
It's quite exciting, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great. It's really hard to argue with that. So we felt like we were in the Beatles. It was kind of
fantastic,
absolutely amazing. And
there's a song, a Blur song, Yuko and Hero on The Great Escape, that has its roots then from there, doesn't it?
Yes. The Hero was the guy from the record label in Japan that was tasked with looking after us. And being tasked with looking after us meant, as we later found out, he wasn't allowed to go home. He had to be there 24/7 in case for some reason or other we needed him. What on earth we would need him for, I don't know. But, at 4 a.m, And not being allowed to go home meant he had to sleep under his desk on the floor.
It's so mad.
So, obviously, my heart went out to him. But the Japanese culture at the time was such that you couldn't do anything about that. It would be a terrible criticism of him to say, I want you to go home. I don't want you to stay in the office looking after us. He would have taken that very badly. So that's like saying, well, you're useless at your job.
It's so strange.
You might have got sacked, Damon wrote a song in part about that called Yuko and Hero, imagining what that life must be like. He now is the head of the label in Japan. So I wonder if he makes his underlings do the same thing. Has the Japanese record industry moved on at all, I wonder?
Yeah, was everyone still sleeping under their desks? Yeah. There are characters in the book as well, which I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit, because when you're a journalist, and also I think when you're a fan with a band, you think, there is the band. Here are the 4 members of the band. That's it. Do you know what I mean? There they are having their photograph taken. There they are playing. There they are in the videos. But obviously, in order to tour, even if it's a small tour, you've got, for instance, a driver, but you've got other people that are around you all the time, and they appear in the book, don't they? Because you've got the camera and you're taking photographs, and they're around all the time.
Yeah, in those early days, we probably had another 5 or 6 people who were permanently with us, and obviously there's no sense of us and them on these kind of things. We're all traveling together, we're all mucking in together, and they're the people. If Blur were these swan gliding across the surface of the pond, they were the people pedalling.
They're the actual legs.
Frantically pedaling beneath the surface to make it all seem as effortless as it is. The people that set everything up, pack everything down, the people that drive things, the people that operate the sound equipment, that operate the lighting, all of that. So we were together 7 days a week for years on end. Many of those people still work for us now.
And when it's small like that, though, and intense like that, especially when you're in America and it's all a bit tough, basically you must have had arguments.
Yeah.
And how was that resolved, given that you're all travelling together in a tiny, well, not tiny, but pretty small environment?
You have to learn to get on with people. The people that can't manage to do that don't last very long in that environment. And often it's just people being in a bad mood and just accepting, don't worry, he's just in a bad mood, it'll pass.
Yeah, it's not about me.
It's not, there's nothing going on here. It's just like I was feeling yesterday, he's feeling today.
Yeah.
But you have to learn pretty early on to get on with people. That's like the fundamental skill, as it turns out, of being in a band, not playing your instrument, but getting on with people.
Yeah. Although I do remember that you had a punching game, Dave.
Yes.
I remember it very well.
Yeah. Dave, our lighting designer, was a Glaswegian who, one of the many delights that he brought from Glasgow to scintillate the Blur, which actually I think was quite a good way of letting off steam, so I won't knock it too much. But yes, when you'd all get so outrageously drunk that you were effectively anaesthetised, we would all sit in a circle, kind of 8 or 10 of us, on chairs, and then each person was allowed to punch the person to their left in the face.
What? What was that? Why was that a good idea? I mean, I remember you suggesting it to, when you were on the roller coaster tour, and you were suggesting it to people like My Bloody Valentine.
Yes.
And they were like, no.
The look of horror on their face.
Why would you do that? You just walk into the dressing room and go, we've got this great game. Do you want to join in?
What saved everyone in this game was that by the time you thought it was a good idea to play the punching game, you were way too drunk, really, to punch anybody successfully. So you'd normally either miss, or there'd be some kind of glancing blow, or the person would be so floppy they would just fall off their chair.
Yeah.
It did get banned after a while because there's the very real possibility you can kill somebody by punching them. So had somebody been accidentally landed a good punch on somebody else, that could have all ended quite tragically. So it was, I think our management intervened and banned the punching game. Yes, for a while that was how dressing rooms would end up when the rider had gone.
Yeah.
Quick, let's play the punching game. Great, yeah.
The logic was just amazing. It was absolutely fantastic. Okay, so when we made this book, you had all these photographs. It took you a while to work out what you wanted to do, and what you realised was that it was a book of firsts. These are like it's an early stage in Blur's career. When you look at it now, all these photographs where you're all, you're like in various states. Everybody's always drunk, or they're really excited, or they're like, there's lots of different kind of emotional states in there. When you look at those pictures, what do you feel like? What do you kind of see?
What came through when I looked at these photos again, which I hadn't done for decades for one reason or another, what came through was the kind of joy in it all, which I'd forgotten. I remember it being a slog. I remember us being permanently exhausted. And many of the photos where people look a bit pissed, they're just so tired, actually. I mean, we didn't drink before the shows. If it's before the show and everybody's going, it's just because they're exhausted. I've made a kind of slumping face there for the purposes of people listening on the.
You did slump.
Yeah, I slumped. So yeah, but the joy, the enthusiasm, the excitement, that's what came through, and that's what I hadn't remembered.
Yeah, that it was really brilliant.
Yeah. Doing all these things, all of those became routine over the years. By 2 or 3 tours in, we were used to tour buses. We were used to the lifestyle, living in bunks and hotels, and we were used to all of that.
It's like your job.
Routine, yeah. I mean, I have to say, we started taking it a bit for granted, and we really did. But at the time in the book, all of this stuff was brand new. It was stuff we'd only ever heard about other people doing, and stuff that hadn't seemed far from guaranteed that we were ever going to be able to do, or that we were ever going to do again. There was no guarantee, given that the music we were making was so unfashionable at the time these pictures were taken. There's no guarantee that this wasn't going to be our 15 minutes, and that's one of the things that made me think, bloody hell, I better document this. I want to remember this. If this is my career as a pop star, I want to remember it. And that also informed what I took the pictures of, because you can remember the big things, but it's the minutiae that you don't remember. And I'd kept a diary various times in my life, and I did the same thing there. Just I didn't write the big, broad brushstrokes. I just wrote down the little details of things that happened and things that people said and things that made me laugh.
Yeah.
So that's what I tried to do here, especially the things that made me laugh. And Graham, so I started with Graham because Graham just cracks me up still to this day.
Yeah, there's a lot of photos of him.
I can't even have a conversation with Graham. I just crack up. I just laugh. He gets all Graham, and I just laugh.
And how would you describe all Graham?
He's a little imp, isn't he, really?
Mm.
He just knows how to make everyone in the band laugh. He's just, he's figured that out over the years. He just knows what face to pull, what silly thing to say.
Yeah, he's more mischievous than I think people realise.
Yeah.
There are the details in there that I really like are things like you playing Lego with Alex because on the bus, because it's so far, everything is so...
Yeah, all the distances. Yeah, I mean, they think nothing of driving 3 days.
Yeah. And actually the kind of weird environments that you end up in, so like odd hotels where everybody's slumped everywhere and you're sharing a room with Alex and Graham's sharing a room with Damon, those kind of elements are very sweet, aren't they?
Yeah. It was all much of what we take for granted for entertainment in the modern age. So it was pre-DVDs even, really. There would probably be a few VHS cassettes of a few films on the bus.
Mm.
If it had a TV, the TV may or may not work. There would be a stereo, and that was the entertainment, really. Other than that, whatever they had on the bus would be whatever the previous bands had left on. One of the buses we found a Lego. So in fact, it was this bus because the picture's in the book. But we found a big box of Lego. And so that became a distraction.
Didn't you used to watch a lot of Meantime?
Yeah, we would. There was 2 or 3 films. You had room in your bag for a couple of films, and there'd be a couple of films on the bus. And, the bus would always be the same. It'd be like Spinal Tap and...
Apocalypse Now.
Yeah. The kind of the longer the better, really, for tour bus films. If it went on for 4 hours, that was ideal, because that was 4 hours of the journey that's gone. So, yeah, you'd watch the same films over and over again. And we watched Meantime, Mike Leigh film, about 1,000 times, and With Nail and I 1,000,000 times. So it got to the point that, a bit like when people go and see the Rocky Horror Picture Show, they kind of narrate the film. It was like that with us. We knew the script of all the films we used to watch over and over. Groundhog Day was another.
Oh God, that's a bit weird. You don't want to do that. Really make yourself feel odd.
But it's a feel-good film by the end, isn't it? That was one of the important things with tour bus films, is they have to, because you're hungover when you're on the bus. You need some kind of feel-good factor. Yeah. Groundhog Day was that. But yeah, we just said all the lines along with the film. You could shout them out.
My last question is quite a weird one, because I remember when I was talking to you, when we were making this book, I mentioned that I had just done an interview with the Manic Street Preachers, and you were like, we never met them. And I was so shocked by this, because in my head, all the bands were kind of mingling at all times. But that is not true, is it? So which bands did you see a lot of, and which bands did you never meet?
Well, we met the London bands, like our contemporaries, but as far as I know, they never lived in London, did they?
No. Well, no, James lived for a little while, but not really, no.
So, yeah, we would never stumble across them of an evening. So, yeah, the bands we met were the sort of Lush, Ride, Chapter House. I mean, the bands of our generation all had one-syllable names. I know I just mentioned Chapter House that were...
Yeah, far too long.
Yeah, there's millions of syllables. I mean, no wonder it was a disaster. But they were the people going out to the gigs, all the other London bands. So not really the Manchester bands, not the Welsh bands, not the Scottish bands.
Yeah.
We bumped into a few people on the kind of promo circuits. We bumped into Take That quite a lot, got to know them reasonably well.
They're so sweet.
Yeah, really nice. And Spice Girls we bumped into from time to time.
How is that? Because they're chaotic.
But some of them are chaotic and some of them aren't. I always got on very well with them. Mel C, and still get on very well with them.
We love Mel C.
Yeah. You do Top of the Pops with bands, but most of the bands on Top of the Pops, that would be their claim to fame, was that they once done Top of the Pops.
Whereas you became veterans.
They would come and go. So a lot of those places, it's not like there was a green room where all the bands would sit and pick their noses and talk about touring. But you would get your own space. You'd get a minder from the record company. And so you'd see these other bands in passing, walking past them. I remember they had just slagged you off in NME.
So you couldn't go and talk to them anyway?
So yeah, you wouldn't run bound over and hug them and tell them they're brilliant.
Yeah, but you weren't drunk enough because you had to be on telly.
Exactly. And after Top of the Pops, everyone went home. There wasn't a party afterwards. I mean, there should have been. There was the BBC bar, but it was the most boring drinking venue in the entire...
It was filled with members of EastEnders, as I remember.
And kind of men in suits, kind of, talking about broadcasting.
Oh, yeah, you don't want that.
You don't want that.
No. I've got one more question. Sorry, I said I had one, but I've got one more question, which is just, I want to talk to you about the nature of nostalgia, which is when you look at these pictures... One might think, or even the nature of this podcast, like we might say, oh, this is just nostalgia. It doesn't feel like it for me. What do you feel like when you're looking at these pictures?
Yeah, maybe I'm unusual and I don't feel nostalgic about any time period of my life. There's no point in history where I think, oh, I really would have loved to have been a teenager in the 60s. That must have been great. I mean, I'd love to have been around at the time of the Civil War. I'd have made an amazing Roundhead. So I don't have this yearning for the past, and never have. So, and certainly when I look at these pictures, they don't feel like the past. That feels like yesterday, really. The people in the photos, we're all in our 20s, early 20s. that's still how I see them. I still see those youthful faces superimposed on on the people's actual bodies, and every now and then, suddenly I get a glimpse of what we actually look like, and it's startling. Oh my God!
Yeah, don't take any photos now. Are you mad?
Yeah, when people say, "Don't you wish you carried on taking photos?" No, have you seen the people in that book?
They're so fit.
That's what we want to immortalise.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, right, look. Here at Talk 90s to Me, we got Trim Trab like the Flash Boys have, and we've also got a playlist. It's called Talk 90s to Me, and you can find it on Spotify. Okay, so Dave, you have to add a 90s track to it. I will tell you if it has already been chosen. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be whatever you like. It's just a 90s track. What would you like to add?
After a couple of years on Food Records, who were the label that signed us, they were like an offshoot of EMI. And after our first flushes of success, EMI reabsorbed them back into the soft underbelly of the label. And so we were kind of moved on to Parlophone. Obviously, Parlophone's the Beatles label, so we were very, very keen to that. Also, Radiohead were on Parlophone, but also Talk Talk were on Parlophone. And I had fallen in love with Talk Talk in the 80s, really. Their album that I like the best is called Spirit of Eden. The most beautiful record, and made in a really extraordinary way. It evolved out of a lot of collaborative musical meanderings, which they then fashioned into a record, something that we would do much later.
Yeah.
It's a very brave way to make a record because you may get nothing.
It's kind of your 13 era.
Yeah.
But Talk Talk is the late 80s. So
yes.
That's not quite allowed, Dave. So no,
okay. So if I can't have that, one of my early memories for the band is there used to be a small circuit gig called the Borderline.
Yeah.
Right next to Tottenham Court Road Station, around the back of Tottenham Court Road Station. And one of the first gigs we all went to after we'd got signed was Ride at the Borderline. And it was the period where they were on the front cover of all the music papers. They seemed like they were, if anybody was going to conquer the world, it was going to be them.
Great band.
Yep. And
fantastic looking as well.
Yep. They were a smash hits band as well as being an NME band. And not many people were treading those two. Treading those two? Not many people were kind of
straddling. Do we say straddling?
Surfing both those waves. And yeah, their single was Leave Them All Behind, which had just been released. And we saw them play this at the Borderline and we were like gobsmacked. Christ. How are we going to have to up our game? How are we going to beat this?
Yeah, they were brilliant. Okay, That's it. It's in there. All right. That was Talk 90s to Me, featuring the fantastic Dave Rowntree, whose brilliant book, and I know this because I worked on it.
There we are. She's the editor. She can say authoritatively that it is brilliant.
It is brilliant. I edited out all the extra shots of the Niagara Falls.
She edited out the rubbish. Left only the brilliant stuff in.
So Know What You Know, Early Blur Photos is out right now. It is great. Blur have just re-released The Great Escape with a lovely new cover.
Yep.
And all your brilliant records are also available. Dave's own record, Radio Days, is also out and has been out for a couple of years. I can thoroughly recommend it. If you want more 90s deep diving, I've written a book called Uncommon People, Britpop and Beyond in 20 songs, like a mixtape of mid-90s British bangers, and of course Blur are in there, because otherwise, I mean, that book wouldn't exist. Subscribe to Talk 90s to Me on your podcast app, because apparently that makes a difference to everything. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky, and enjoy whatever 90s nonsense we chuck at you. See you next time.